Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome to the new week. Only have about 5 weeks of school left, so worth getting excited for. Anyway, I wanted to give you a short set of notes today. Hopefully, we'll keep it to like 10 minutes instead of the normal 15. It's a little bit shorter, but sometimes I get long-winded, so we'll see what happens. Um, anyway, yeah, let's get started. So you guys did a couple of those video watchings on the Cold War. I just wanted to sort of bring out some of the ideas and sort of, I don't know, sort of set up some of the timelines and really spell out sort of what happened first and next and after to sort of help clarify why the Cold War was what it was. So we're just going to go over some of the early year events. If we can switch over, there we go. Let me get my little laser pointer there in case I want it. All right. So, the video, that very first question on the video, and the questions I asked was, when did the video say the Cold War began? And it's really a good question. The agreed upon year is 1947 by most historians, but there are different ways of looking at the question, and there are different ways of sort of asking what you mean by the question, and so people could define it differently if they chose. The video tries to imply that way back during World War One, Germany was fighting against Russia, if you might remember, Tsarist Russia, and they wanted Russia out of the war. Um, well, with all the turmoil and trouble that was going on inside of Russia, Vladimir Lenin fled the country and actually went to Germany. And while he's in Germany, the ideas of his communist ideas and the government was aware of it, and they actually helped sneak Lenin back into the country, hoping that he would start a revolution in Russia. They didn't necessarily think it would really happen, but you try anything you can. So the Germans of 1917 helped Lenin get back into Russia, hoping he would lead the country out of the war, which he did. And so some people say that if you think about it, the tensions with communist Russia, communist Soviet Union, and the United States, you can trace their roots all the way back to 1917. So that's what the video was referring to there. So you could say that. You could say, as I mentioned in the last week, that the atomic bombs in Japan were in some ways meant to again keep the Soviets out of the Pacific-Japanese War of World War II, to try to end the war before they entered, and to keep, well, and also to let the Soviets know, hey, we have the bomb, we have this power that you don't have, which at the time was true. So some people say that the dropping of the bombs was the first sort of signal of the Cold War. Um, Others argue that after the breakdown of the Yalta Conference and even the Potsdam Conference that happens after that, Stalin states that communism and capitalism cannot coexist in the world. They can't exist together in the same world. Did that start the Cold War? Or what generally, if you look on Wikipedia, if you just sort of look on a Google search, when did the Cold War begin? Most people will say 1947. And that's when Truman issued in a speech, in a statement, that it is the job of America to defend free elections, to fight communism anywhere in the world, and to make sure that communism doesn't spread. And if you think of what that means to somebody else, everything you stand for, we're going to fight against. Well, that sort of establishes your heads butting and the differences in what you believe and can happen and will happen. So you look at those sort of events and you can sort of see all of them contribute to what's the actual beginning of the Cold War. Um, we'll go with the Truman Doctrine because it's sort of the established one, but it's good to understand those other ideas. Again, I'm going to keep moving on here, but if you need to pause and to get any of the notes, feel free to do that. I just wanted to give you a quick timeline. I know that, I know it's hard to remember all these dates, but sort of understanding how one thing leads to the next is it's so important. And this is really sort of key in looking at this. So if we just look at 1945, the year that World War II ends, in February, before the war ended in either Europe or Asia, um, you have Churchill from Great Britain, Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, from the United States, and Stalin, Joseph Stalin, from the Soviet Union, joining together, excuse me, um, in Yalta. And Yalta is just a place along the Black Sea. And so that's where they met. It's called the Yalta Conference because Yalta is the place they met. Um, anyway, so this is in February, and they started to discuss. It was pretty clear the war was going to end very soon, and they started to discuss what are we going to do after. And that was sort of where you might remember Soviet Union agreed to enter the war against Japan 90 days after the end of the European War. This is where they agreed to that kind of thing. Okay, now 2 months later, before Germany is defeated, Franklin Roosevelt dies in office, just of natural causes. Later that month, and then in early May, we have VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. Germany is defeated right at the end of April. Hitler commits suicide, and then the official signing happens in early May, and that's when you get VE Day. In June 1945, the United Nations is created, and this is supposed to be sort of like the League of Nations, but it's the sort of the newer body that works to look over these sort of world events. And a whole bunch of nations, like 50 nations, join, but 5 nations are given sort of this veto power, a special Security Council. And both USA and USSR are given that vote. They're members of that. My board here, today, by the way, the 20th of April is the day in 1999 when the Columbine shooting happened. So that's why I have hashtag Remember Columbine. Anyway, all right. So you have the UN being created in June. And then in August, on the 6th and the 9th, the atomic bombs are dropped on Japan. And remembering that August 8th was the date USSR had agreed at Yalta to enter the war. So there's clearly some push to try to avoid the Soviet Union getting any credit and any responsibility in the Pacific War. The United States is already wanting to keep them separate. They have never liked the communist Soviet Union. The United States supplied aid to, hold on 1 second. Sorry about that, had to sneeze. Anyway, the United States had supported the White Army in the Russian Civil War. So suffice it to say, the United States was never, ever happy with the idea of the Soviet Union. All right, I'm going to pause this again here because I think my screen has now showed the bar here at the bottom. I'm going to try to get rid of that. Well, I thought I got rid of it and then it came back. But anyway, it's there. Well, maybe it'll go away soon. All right. Post-war fallout. So the wars ended in August, September of 1945, and the tension starts immediately. I mean, think about it this way. The United States and Soviet Union were only together because Germany attacked both of them. Well, Germany declared war on both of them. Germany had been friends with the Soviet Union at the beginning of the war. right? They had agreed not to fight each other. Uh, Hitler used Stalin to help defeat Poland and destroy it and divide it up. And then when it suited Germany's needs, they turned around and fought Germany. But at the beginning, Stalin had no problems joining in with Hitler. Um, I think that would never have been the case in America. There's two totally different worldviews going on here, and the only reason they were together is because of a common enemy. No other real connection. Um, and think about it, they also have different goals. In theory, as we talked about back in the first semester, communism is designed to replace capitalism. Karl Marx said that capitalism is a bad idea, and the next form of economy that should be developed is communism to replace capitalism. And so right away, you have the Soviet Union and the United States on totally different grounds. Um, Stalin's a dictator, no free elections, and that's against American ideals. Um, and then you also have to look at the situation in the Soviet Union after the war. 1 in 4 Soviets is dead because of the war. It's 50 and the number of people killed. We talked about that number of 13 million soldiers and 7 million civilians. 50 times they had the number of casualties in the Soviet Union. So the war meant totally different things to both sides. All right. And again, this is a repeat. You don't necessarily have to rewrite all of this, but seriously, think about what do you do when one side, Stalin, is trying to promote communism and forces communism on new countries, neighboring countries like Poland and Czechoslovakia, which we'll talk about in a minute. And he says that war is inevitable between a communist and a capitalistic society. So how they just can't coexist. You have him saying this on one side, and on the other side, you have Truman saying, we will fight communism and the spread anywhere in the world. How do they not come together and clash? So again, don't you've written these things already. It's just think about how problematic that is. All right. Quick. I know I'm going a little longer than I wanted, but I'll stop it at 15 and that'll be the end of wherever we're at. So, some of the early battles of the Cold War. First of all, Germany becomes divided right after the war. You have the Soviet influenced East Germany and the Western, meaning British, French, American influenced West Germany. And I'll show you a map hopefully here in a minute. Berlin itself, within East Germany, is divided between East and West, and that's sort of strange and hard to deal with. So these are some of the early battlegrounds. Early on in the 1940s, the mid 1940s, right after the war, from 45 to 49, Stalin starts exerting this influence over the countries of Eastern Europe. And think about World War I, what happened? Well, the Germans, where did they attack? Into Russia. If you go back to Napoleon, European conquest, tries to attack Russia. And then World War II, Hitler, what's he do? Befriends him and then turns around and attacks across Germany. And so they wanted a buffer zone. And that's where we get the 8 European, Eastern European countries that he sort of forces to become communist. And it's all about trying to create this protection. It becomes known as the Iron Curtain, as Winston Churchill names it. But that's basically what they wanted. They wanted some protection from these European wars. So here's a map of that. So the blue obviously is what we refer to as Western European, more democratically or republic-based countries. And then you have this Iron Curtain, including Albania and eventually Yugoslavia. And you get these 8 countries of Albania, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and of course East Germany. And then I'll quickly show you a little map here of Germany at the time. So right after the war, we have the British and the United States and the French and Belgium. They had their sort of side of West Germany divided into these spheres of influence.